Part 5. What makes a good Halo game? The tone and the soundtrack. There's something about Halo 5's campaign that took me a long time to figure out. Something I just couldn't put my finger on. You ever get the feeling that Halo 5's campaign just felt off? I'm not talking about the bland dialogue, pointless characters, or lack of explanation for pretty much anything. I'm talking about how the campaign felt. In other words, the tone. Now, the tone of any story is very important because it's how the writer expresses his or her attitude about the subject matter and how the writer conveys this to the audience. Tone is how a story feels. And most people don't pay much attention to it or really think about it. But whether you realize it or not, your brain does. Without even thinking about it, your brain is tuning in and your emotions take over as you feel the story instinctively. For example, when you first watched this cutscene that revealed the flood, you probably had the feeling of suspense, of mystery, fear, uncovering something that was not meant to be uncovered. Or when you saw Johnson drop off the tank for the Chief in Halo 2, you got the feeling of morale boosted. Badassness. Is that a word? Badassness? Or when Chief landed the cryo tube at the end of Halo 3, you got the feeling of completion. A feeling of returning to the point you started at. You got the feeling of a fight that was finished. The Halo franchise has always been known for its superb storytelling, but what Halo has always been really good at that most people might not realize was setting a good tone. Now, all you have to do to understand this is go play through any of the other campaigns, and while you're playing through, ask yourself this: what do the writers want me to feel right now? Do that and you'll begin to understand why tone is such an important piece of what makes a good Halo game. Now, in most cases, the tone of Halo 5 isn't very clear at all, and that's why it feels weird. Like the fight between Locke and Chief. What did the writers want us to feel when we watched that? Disappointment? Yes, thank you. And I mean, what's the deal with this airline food? I mean, oh, right, sorry. Most of the time I could understand what the tone was supposed to be. The only problem is the story does such a terrible job of conveying the tone every time it tries. Like this scene where Tanaka is reminiscing about how far they've come together. We're supposed to get the feeling of a team that has been through a lot. A team that works together. A team that doesn't stand idly by while their leader gets bitch-slapped with a battle rifle. But everything before this has done such a poor job of characterizing Osiris, setting up their personalities and how they interact as a team, that we don't feel or agree with what Tanaka is saying. As an audience, it doesn't feel like we've been through hell and back with them. Halo games have always been really good at making you feel something important. It's one of the biggest reasons why the games are so beloved by people, because what they feel when they play it can only be described as sheer awesomeness. Halo's tone has a wide range and appeals to a lot of emotions that humans inherently have. Fear, love, anger, sadness, mysterious, death, excitement, nostalgia, reunion, redemption, and so on. Now you tell me if you felt any of these things when you played through Halo 5's campaign, and if so, how strong was that feeling? Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, the soundtracks in the Bungie Halo games were so good that it cemented Halo's legacy. While everything that was going on screen was awesome, what tied it all together was the music. Whether it was during the cutscenes or the gameplay, Marty O'Donnell was able to implement a soundtrack that worked to damn near perfection. There's just so many key moments where the soundtrack just amplifies what's going on to such a degree that it creates memorable moments. Moments where you hear the soundtrack and you can say, this song played at this part of the game. Now, the music was always a very, very strong tool that Halo games used to form a connection with the audience and create a very strong tone. But honestly, the soundtrack in Halo 5 is just pedestrian. It's almost unnoticeable. Sure, there's a couple moments where the soundtrack is pretty awesome, like the beginning cutscene and the intro of Blue Team, but off the top of my head, despite all the research I've done, I can't think of anything else. And I'm not saying they need to copy everything that Marty did, but they need to be able to come up with a unique, memorable soundtrack that helps reinforce the tone and create a strong connection with the audience. audience, because the soundtrack has always been one of the biggest parts of what makes a good Halo game. There's a standard of quality that Halo soundtracks have, and Halo 5 just doesn't come anywhere close to that standard. You know, it's kind of hard to explain tone, because it's based on natural feelings that we all have. But in short, Halo 5 doesn't do a very good job of making the audience feel anything. Number 14. Filler to the brim and fan service. It goes without saying that there isn't much of importance that happens in Halo 5. The game's got more filler than a dozen Twinkies. And filler is the stuff that goes on between the important things. It's basically meant to add or maintain a certain time limit or length of a story. Like, remember when Goku and Piccolo learned how to drive? Yeah, that was some pretty bad filler. But in the case of Dragon Ball Z, though many of the episodes contain filler, they've got 276 episodes. So that's hundreds of hours worth of entertainment. Now, the difference between 276 episodes of Dragon Ball Z and an 8-hour Halo campaign is a lot of time. So when you got a campaign story like Halo, where parts of it are almost like a movie, you really can't have any filler to waste the precious time of the audience and the story. If you're paying animators to create filler cutscenes, then that's a waste of resources as well. In a campaign like Halo, adding in filler is just a waste. Now, Halo 5 does have pretty much the shortest campaign in the series, but even worse, it has the most filler as well. So what we're left with is a story where not much happens. In a nutshell, Halo 5 is filler. I mean, the whole point of the story is to make Cortana the villain, have her gain control of the Guardians, and to introduce Osiris and Locke. Nothing else really matters. That whole trip to saying Helios was just filler so that 343 could shoehorn the Arbiter into the game for some fan service. Buck being in Halo 5, he's just there for comic relief and fan service. He doesn't really do anything that changes or affects the outcome of the story. That whole second mission with Blue Team was only there so that Chief could have a vision of Cortana and lead him to his next goal. And Blue Team was in the game for fan service to the lore addicts. Warden Eternal was in the game just to delay the end where Blue Team and Osiris reach Cortana. He didn't offer anything special. He was filler. Lasky and Palmer were in Halo 5 because they were in Halo 4. But in Halo 5, they're filler characters. They're just there. There's just so much damn filler. So much that I can't even cover it all in this video. And all this filler, it waters down the story. It's like we're drinking 15% beer and 85% water. It sucks and it tastes like shit. Makes the story much less guided and focused. Number 15. What is the greater purpose? In addition to the tone being an important part of what makes a good Halo game, another thing that most people don't think about is the theme, the greater purpose behind the story. Tone is how the writers want you to feel. Theme is what the writers want you to think about. What do you get from the story after you've read it? What do you learn from it? And all of the Halo games have explored a bunch of different themes. There's so much room for interpretation here, and while your opinions might be different from mine, neither of us is necessarily right or wrong. So let's take a look at the why, the themes of the other Halo games. And keep in mind, there are more themes than what I talk about here. Halo Combat Evolved is about discovery. It's about human survival. Halo is about the resolve and strength of the human race. Despite being stacked against all odds, facing multiple alien species that outpower us in every way possible, despite the fall of Reach, somehow humanity manages to come up on top because of our resolve, because you are a super soldier. Sure, you might have augmentations, incredible skill, and a badass fortified suit of armor, but underneath that armor, you're still a human. One human that saved the world, the universe, and the human race from certain destruction. Halo Combat Evolved is about the galactic impact that one person can have. Halo 2 is about the dangers of religious fanaticism. It's about self-discovery. It's about learning what is really out there in the world. Think about how the Arbiter's encounter with the heretic leader would have gone if he had only listened. Had Arbiter not been bound blindlessly to his faith, he could have learned about the lies behind his religion, how the prophets used and controlled him, and millions of other elites, and the Covenant, used them to believe in them as prophets of a great journey meant to bring eternal salvation to them all. Think of how the encounter would have gone between Tartarus and Arbiter had Tartarus only listened to him. Just like Arbiter, had Tartarus not been blindlessly bound to his faith, he might have learned the truth. Halo 2 is about having the courage to question the powers that control us, to not simply believe everything we are told, to be willing to learn, listen, and become better through our understanding. Halo 3 is about finishing what you start. It's about being able to put your differences aside with someone who feels like a complete alien to you. Being able to put aside your pride and work with your worst enemy. Halo 3 is about learning to forgive, but not forget. Halo 3 is about the sacrifices humanity is willing to take to ensure their survival. It's about honoring your veterans, honoring those people that sacrificed their most valuable possession for something greater. ODST is about reminding you that you are human. Despite who you were in the past, the pedestal you used to stand on, you can always drop down, back to earth, down to reality. And sometimes that drop isn't pretty. Sometimes you realize just how powerless you appear to be. Sometimes it feels like the whole world is out to get you, that you don't have a friend in the world. But despite how things appear to be, it's up to you to find the truth. And that truth is, even if you don't have an augmented body and a super suit, even if you don't have the most powerful tools at your disposal, you do have power. And you should never underestimate your abilities to turn the scales in your favor. Reach is about the eventual death that we all face. But how do we face the death we know will come for us one day? Do we go out in a blaze of glory? Do we sacrifice ourselves for the sake of others, for a greater purpose that we believe in? Can we learn to embrace death when the time comes? Halo Reach is about never losing hope, never giving up. For as long as there is something worth fighting for, it is our duty as soldiers, humans, as whoever, to fight for it. Halo Reach is about remembrance, to never forget the sacrifices that were made to ensure you lived a good life. Remember the sacrifices people made to ensure that tomorrow was a better day. Halo 4 is about companionship. It's about learning to let go of your loved ones. For in time, all things pass. Halo 4 is about being able to move on with life, and that no matter how much we live life on autopilot, there will come a time when we must embrace our humanity, because we aren't just a number. We aren't just a statistic. We're more than just soulless machines moving through a life that has been predetermined for us. We are always human. And while you might think all of those themes I talked about are dramatic, maybe over the top, those are the themes that I believe in. Those are the lessons I learned from playing the Halo games. That is what I got out of it. If you were to ask me what the themes are for any of the Halo games, I would tell you what I just said, and I could go even more in depth. But not with Halo 5, because I don't feel the greater purpose behind Halo 5's story. Sure, I could come up with some bullshit answers, but I wouldn't believe them, and neither would you, because Halo 5's story has no greater purpose. It's not meant to teach us anything, to get us to think about any topic in particular. In my opinion, it appears the writers wanted to do all these cool, awesome things, but they never stopped to think about why they were doing them. What was the greater purpose behind everything? And because of this, it loses that thing that all the other Halo games had, that greater purpose, that reason for why the story was written. Number 16. Why is Halo 5's campaign so bad? So at this point, I've pretty much covered all of the important points I wanted to, but there's a far greater problem that I haven't talked about yet, and this is the real reason why Halo 5's campaign is so bad. The reason is Halo 5's story is a collection of great ideas, but it is nothing more than that. Think of any story as a puzzle. You got all the different pieces, characters, dialogue, setting, plot, tone, and all these pieces combine together to create a fantastic image. But before you create the puzzle, you have to know what the image is. And from there, you create each piece and put it into place so that it works with the rest of the pieces. There are so many ideas and concepts that are carelessly thrown into Halo 5, but there's not enough focus or attention paid to any one of them to make them special, to make them unique, or to give them the time necessary to be memorable. It creates this misguided, unfocused game that lacks a true sense of direction. Halo 5's campaign is a puzzle with all these different pieces pieces, but nothing fits together. Nothing is logical, nothing makes sense, nothing works. And it makes you wonder why all these pointless characters, plot points, and game mechanics were added in the first place. You got Frank O'Connor with this idea of adding a reason for co-op with the squad-based gameplay, but that idea led to the introduction of 6 pointless characters that diluted the story. And it didn't do anything else, except create a bizarre, frustrating spin on the gameplay in Halo campaigns. From the trailers, we see this idea of Chief betraying humanity, and this huge rivalry between Locke and Chief. But what we got was the most anticlimactic AWOL, and a terribly choreographed cutscene between 2 characters that don't really have any conflict between each other. We have this idea of the Artemis tracking system, which is a tool the player uses to find buttons and other stuff. But this piece doesn't work or have anything to do with the rest of the puzzle. It's not given any reason for being there, it's just there. We have all the new Spartan abilities and mechanics, which are ideas that are never explored or given any attention in the story. For some reason, all the Spartans can do these new abilities. There's no attention or justification for why they can do them. Why didn't Chief ever use these Spartan abilities before? We have the idea of Chief learning to live without Cortana, of Chief learning to become human, but that's hardly given any attention or screen time, so it's just an idea. We have the idea of an epic battle between the Swords of Sanghelios and the Covenant, a civil war. But that piece of the story has nothing to do with Halsey being hunted by Oni, it has nothing to do with the Warden, it has nothing to do with anything. Do you see what I'm getting at? In a story, everything is connected, because it's like a puzzle. Because all the different pieces create a beautiful image that you can enjoy. Every piece has a purpose, it has a place, a reason for being there. And the reason why Halo 5's campaign is so bad is because it's a mangled, incomplete puzzle that displays no clear image.
This is the biggest and most ambitious Halo campaign yet.
Yes, you're right, Josh. It is the most ambitious campaign. But what good is ambition if you can't execute the ideas? What good is it if you see yourself as the greatest football player of all time, but you don't practice? Brian Reed tells us that they had the idea of Cortana being the villain from the get-go. And in this dialogue, Frank O'Connor relays some very important information.
The truth is, we sort of know where we're heading.
Yeah,
we have some pillars, but we don't really know where we're going to end up.
What he's basically saying is they don't know where the story is going to go. They didn't set out with a clear destination. They didn't have a clear image of the puzzle they were trying to create. And there's an important saying that I think Brian Reed needs to understand. Begin with the end in mind. Now, what does that mean? To begin with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. It means to know where you're going so that you better understand where you are now and so that the steps you take are always in the right direction. This applies to life in general, but it also applies to storytelling. If you set out to tell a story with no clear destination, no clear plan or goal, what you're gonna end up with is a complete mess. And if you need to have the story finished by a certain deadline, then what you got is what you got. By the time Halo 5 went gold, by the time they started shipping and sending out copies, this is what 343 had. Everything is created twice. There's the creation in our minds, the mental, and there is the physical creation, the execution. Anybody can create the greatest thing ever in their minds. That's easy to do, but it takes true talent, true vision to create it on the physical level, to execute. And that's pretty much it. That's all I really wanted to say about Halo 5's campaign. Sure, I could talk about the gameplay, the setting, everything else that's wrong with it. I could talk about it for a long time. But what I've highlighted in these 5 videos is what I believe to be the most important failures of Halo 5's campaign. So let's recap. The misleading ad campaign that painted a truly epic picture, but failed to be in the actual game. The apparent connection of the campaign with loads of expanded lore material, which alienated the general audience. The intro cinematics that ruined the pacing and started things off on the wrong foot. The action scenes that were wasted potential, meant to distract you and added nothing to the story. The pointless characters that were shoehorned in to satisfy a gameplay mechanic or act as fan service. Terrible dialogue consisting of 95% exposition. Poorly written and poorly developed characters that act nothing like they did in previous games. the lack of connection with the previous games, while simultaneously dropping everything from Halo 4. The absence of a true protagonist and antagonist, and attempts to tell a more complex story that jumps outside the fiction-telling norms, but a failure to execute this properly. A complete disregard for the fundamental basics of fiction writing, Chekhov's gun, show don't tell, plot points with little to no explanation, failure to make the player care or connect to the setting, story, characters, a cavalcade of terribly voice-acted audio logs, a missing campaign theater, time trials, leaderboards, and campaign scoring, enemies and villains that we don't understand or care about, an unclear tone that players can't feel or connect with, vast amounts of filler, and a bunch of ideas that don't work together to form a complete puzzle. These are the main problems, and the reasons why Halo 5's campaign is so bad. I hope through these videos you've learned something about storytelling. I hope you had a good time watching these. I hope I've been able to say the things that you were thinking but couldn't say yourself. And I hope you enjoyed this video series. Alright, finally the series has come to an end. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with it, and though I could go on, I had to finish the fight at some point. I think it's pretty fitting to finish this Halo 5 review with a 5th video. My next project is going to be reviewing Halo Reach's campaign, so stick around for that. If you enjoyed the video, then leave a like and subscribe to the Actman channel for more awesome content. Post your comments, thoughts, and opinions down below as always. Let me know what you think, and if you haven't already, then check out parts 1 through 4. Links in the description and on screen. Alright everyone, thank you all so much for your support. Now we can all put this terrible story behind us and move forward. That's all I got for today. This is the Actman signing out. Peace!